Smoke rose from the palace kitchens before dawn broke over London. The scullery maids were always first to wake in the great house of Windsor, their hands plunged into freezing water, while the rest of the palace slept in warmth and comfort. Mira Whitley scrubbed at the copper pots with fingers already raw from the morning's work. 20 years old, with hair the color of wheat fields and eyes like spring meadows, she kept her gaze lowered as the cook barked orders across the stone kitchen. 3 years she had served in the royal household, invisible as the steam that rose from the washing basins. "Move faster, girl." Mrs. Harlow snapped, her thick arms crossed over her apron. "The Queen's ladies will be wanting their breakfast trays, and they'll have our heads if a single spoon is spotted." Mira nodded, her voice soft as morning mist. "Yes, Mrs. Harlow." The other servants barely noticed her. She was the quiet one, the girl who never complained, who scrubbed until her hands bled, who took the heaviest loads without a word of protest. Her mother had been a washerwoman who died when Mira was 12. Her father, a stableman, had passed 2 winters later, leaving her with nothing but her willingness to work. Above the stairs, the palace gleamed with wealth beyond imagination. Below stairs, where Mira spent her days, the world was cold stone and endless labor. But she never complained. Complaining changed nothing. "Whitley," the head butler's voice cut through the kitchen noise, "you're wanted in the Queen's private parlor." The entire kitchen fell silent. Mira froze, her hands dripping soap onto the stone floor. No scullery maid was ever summoned to the Queen's presence. Something terrible must have happened. "Me, sir?" Her voice trembled. "Now, girl, and mind you don't touch anything on your way." Mira dried her hands on her apron, her heart beating like a trapped bird against her ribs. As she followed the butler through corridors she had only glimpsed while carrying coal buckets, she felt the weight of her station like chains around her ankles. The royal parlor door opened before her like the gates of heaven itself. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbows across silk wallpaper. Ladies in morning gowns of lavender and rose turned to stare at the girl in the stained grey dress and white cap. "This is the creature?" Lady Helena Ashford's voice dripped with disdain. She was the Queen's favourite lady-in-waiting, beautiful as a portrait painting, cruel as winter frost. "Your Majesty," the butler bowed. "The scullery maid Mira Whitley, as requested." Queen Victoria sat in a high-backed chair near the fire, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood 3 of her ladies, all watching Mira with the interest one might show a strange insect. "Come forward, girl," the Queen commanded. Mira took 3 steps and dropped into the deepest curtsy she could manage, her knees touching the Persian carpet. "Your Majesty, look at me when I address you." Mira raised her eyes, fighting every instinct that told her to keep them lowered. The Queen was smaller than she had imagined, but her presence filled the entire room. "You are the daughter of Thomas Whitley, who served in my stables." "Yes, Your Majesty. He was an honest man. I was told of his death." Something flickered in the Queen's eyes that might have been sympathy. "You have been working in my kitchens these 3 years, since—" "Yes, Your Majesty." Lady Helena stepped forward, her silk skirts rustling like snake scales. Such a pity that honest blood should produce such a plain creature. "Look at her hands, Your Majesty. Red as lobsters and twice as ugly." The other ladies tittered behind their fans. Mira's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on the Queen, as commanded. "My ladies forget themselves," Queen Victoria said quietly, but the rebuke had no teeth. She turned her attention back to Mira. "There is a task I require done. A private matter that needs discretion and absolute loyalty. I am your servant in all things, Your Majesty." Indeed, the Queen's expression remained cool. "My son, the King of Hanover, arrives tomorrow for an extended visit. You will be assigned to his personal service during his stay. Mira's eyes widened before she could control her reaction. She had heard of the King of Hanover, Queen Victoria's eldest son from her first marriage, before she had married Prince Albert. He ruled a distant kingdom now, but returned rarely to England. Your Majesty, I am only a scullery maid. Surely a lady's maid, or— You will do as commanded, Lady Helena interrupted sharply. His Majesty requires a servant of absolute discretion, someone invisible. You are certainly that. More cruel laughter from the assembled ladies. Mira swallowed the humiliation like bitter medicine.
You are dismissed, Queen Victoria said. Mrs. Harlow will provide you with appropriate attire. You will present yourself tomorrow at dawn to attend the King's arrival.
Mira curtsied again and backed from the room, her mind spinning with confusion and dread. Why would a king require the service of the lowest servant in the palace? That night, as she lay on her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, sleep would not come. The other maids whispered around her in the darkness. I heard the King of Hanover is a monster, Mary, the kitchen maid hissed. They say he was wounded in a great battle and his face is scarred like a demon's. I heard he killed a man with his bare hands once, another voice added in the gloom. They say he's cold as ice and twice as cruel. No woman will have him, so he lives alone in his palace across the sea. Poor Mira. Mary's voice held false sympathy. To be chosen for such duty. What sin did you commit to deserve it? Mira said nothing, her hands clasped over her chest where her mother's small silver cross hung on a thin chain. The only thing she owned of value hidden always beneath her dress. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Fear would not change it. Dawn came cold and grey. Mira dressed in the new uniform Mrs. Harlow had provided, a simple black dress with white collar and cuffs, better than her scullery rags, but still marking her as the lowest rank of servant. Her hair was pinned severely beneath a fresh white cap. Remember your place, Mrs. Harlow warned, as Mira stood before her for inspection. Eyes down, voice soft, hands busy. You speak only when spoken to. You touch nothing. You're not commanded to touch. One mistake, and you'll be dismissed without a character reference. Do you understand? Yes, Mrs. Harlow. The king is not like other men. He has seen terrible things in war. He has no patience for foolishness or error. The cook's expression softened slightly. But he is also just, they say. Serve him well and faithfully, and you may find yourself better positioned than before. Mira curtsied and made her way to the east entrance where she had been told to wait. The morning air bit through her thin dress. She stood alone for nearly an hour, shivering, before the sound of hooves on cobblestones announced the royal arrival. 6 black horses pulled a gilded carriage through the palace gates. Footmen rushed to open doors to lower steps, to bow and scrape before the emerging figure. He was tall. That was Mira's first thought as the King of Hanover stepped from his carriage, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a military coat of deep blue with silver buttons that caught the weak sunlight. His hair was dark as midnight, longer than fashion dictated, pulled back in a simple tail. Then he turned, and Mira saw his face. A scar ran from his right temple down across his cheek, pulling slightly at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were grey as winter storms, and when they swept across the assembled servants, Mira felt as though she had been touched by ice itself. Your Majesty. Queen Victoria herself had come to greet her son, a rare honor. She extended her hands and he took them, bowing low with genuine affection. Mother, you look well. His voice surprised Mira, deep and controlled, but not harsh. There was warmth in it when he addressed the Queen, a gentleness that contradicted everything she had heard whispered in the darkness. Come inside, my son. You must be weary from your journey." Queen Victoria turned, gesturing toward where Mira stood with the other servants. "I have assigned you a personal attendant during your stay. This is Whitley, a loyal girl from our household." The king's grey eyes found Mira among the servants. She dropped into a curtsy so deep her knees protested, her head bowed, her hands clenched in her skirt. "Rise," he commanded. She obeyed, keeping her eyes carefully lowered. "You will attend me directly," he said. "No other servants unless I call for them. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty." He studied her for a moment longer, and Mira felt the weight of that gaze like physical pressure. Then he turned away, following Queen Victoria into the palace, and Mira released the breath she had been holding. The days that followed fell into a strange pattern. Mira attended the king in his private apartments, bringing meals, tending the fire, preparing his bath, laying out fresh clothing. He spoke little, and when he did, his words were commands, not conversation. But he was never cruel, never harsh. He did not snap at her for small mistakes, did not strike her when she stumbled. He simply existed in his space, and she moved around him like a ghost, trying to be as invisible as possible. Still, she noticed things. The way he would stand at the window for hours, staring out at the gardens, with an expression of profound loneliness. The way his hands would tremble sometimes when he thought no one was watching. The nightmares that woke him in the darkness, leaving him gasping and disoriented, until Mira would quietly stoke the fire higher and leave fresh water on his bedside table without being asked. On the fifth morning, as she entered his chambers to open the curtains, she found him already awake, seated at his desk with papers spread before him. He did not look up as she moved silently across the room, but as she reached for the curtain cord, his voice stopped her. "Tell me, Whitley, what do they say about me below stairs?" Mira froze, her hand on the velvet cord. "Your Majesty, the servants. What stories do they tell about the scarred king from across the sea?" There was no emotion in his voice, just quiet curiosity. She turned to face him, her heart pounding. Honesty or comfort? Which did he want? "They say," she began carefully, "that you are a great warrior, that you have seen terrible battles. That is diplomatic of you." The corner of his scarred mouth lifted slightly. "But not what I asked." "What do they truly say?" Mira drew a breath. "They say you are cold and cruel, that your face frightens children, that no woman would willingly look upon you." The words hung in the air between them. Mira waited for his anger, for dismissal, for punishment. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Yes, that sounds correct." He returned his attention to his papers. "You may continue with your duties." But as Mira opened the curtains, allowing morning light to flood the room, she dared one more glance at him. His expression was carefully neutral, but something in his eyes spoke of old pain, deep as an ocean. That afternoon, as Mira passed through the palace corridors carrying fresh linens, she encountered Lady Helena and two other ladies in waiting, all dressed in their finest for the Queen's afternoon tea. "Well, well," Lady Helena's voice stopped Mira in her tracks. "If it isn't the creature chosen to attend His Majesty, tell us, girl, has he devoured you yet, or does he save that for the full moon?" The ladies dissolved into cruel laughter. Mira curtsied and tried to step around them, but Lady Helena moved to block her path. "Answer when your betters address you." "His Majesty is a kind master," Mira said quietly. "I am honored to serve him." "A kind master?" Lady Helena's eyes glittered with malice. "How sweet! The Scullery Maid thinks the monster is kind. Perhaps she has no other standard for comparison, having spent her life among pots and ashes." "Her father was a stableman," another lady added, and her mother washed the palace linens. Such breeding naturally seeks its own level. I heard, the third lady leaned in with a stage whisper, that the King of Hanover specifically requested the ugliest, plainest servant in the household. He cannot bear to look upon beauty, you see, as it reminds him of what he can never have. The linens shook in Mira's arms as fury and shame warred within her chest. But she had learned long ago that servants who spoke back found themselves dismissed and homeless. She kept her eyes lowered and her mouth closed. Nothing to say? Lady Helena's fan tapped against Mira's shoulder. How disappointing. I had hoped for some spirit, some small defense of your wretched station. But no, you simply stand there like the dull creature you are. Let her pass, Helena. The voice cut through the corridor like a knife, cold and commanding. All four women turned to find the King of Hanover standing at the corridor's end, his grey eyes fixed on Lady Helena with an intensity that made her falter. Your Majesty, she curtsied quickly, her face paling. We were simply... I heard precisely what you were doing. He moved toward them with measured steps, and the ladies shrank back like flowers before frost. You were exercising the particular cruelty that weak people reserve for those who cannot defend themselves. Your Majesty, I meant no harm. We were merely... You were mocking a servant who has shown me nothing but competence and dignity in her service. The king stopped before them, his scarred face terrible in its controlled anger. While you, Lady Helena, have shown me nothing but shallow vanity and casual cruelty since my arrival. Lady Helena's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Behind her, the other two ladies looked ready to faint. Whitley, the king turned his gaze to Mira. Come with me. These ladies will not trouble you further. Mira hurried to follow him, her arms full of linens, her mind spinning with shock. Behind them, she could hear the ladies' outraged whispers, but the king's presence seemed to part the very air before them as they walked. He led her, not to his chambers, but to a small private sitting room she had never entered before. Once inside, he closed the door and gestured to a chair. Sit, Your Majesty, I cannot. I am a servant. Sit down, Mira Whitley. The use of her full name startled her into obedience. She perched on the edge of a velvet chair, the linens still clutched in her lap, her heart racing. The king moved to the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. For a long moment he said nothing, and Mira wondered if she had somehow displeased him. I apologize, he said finally, his voice quiet. Mira stared at his back in confusion. Your Majesty, for what you endure in my service, I had not considered that attending me would make you a target for their amusement. I am used to it. Your Majesty. The ladies have always treated the servants thus. He turned to face her, his scarred face outlined by the window light. That does not make it acceptable. Mira didn't know what to say. Kings did not apologize to scullery maids. Kings did not defend them from ladies in waiting. The world had tilted somehow, and she could not find her balance. You said I am a kind master, he continued. Earlier to Lady Helena. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? The question caught her off guard. Because it is true, you do not strike me for small errors. You do not berate me or mock me. You treat me with basic human dignity. In my experience, that qualifies as kindness. Something painful flickered across his expression. Your experience has been harsh, if simple decency qualifies as kindness. I am a servant, Your Majesty. I expect nothing more. Perhaps that is the problem, he said softly. We have all come to expect so little of each other that basic humanity seems like extraordinary virtue. He moved closer, and Mira instinctively drew back in her chair. He stopped, noting her reaction, and something like regret crossed his face. I frighten you. My appearance. No, Mira interrupted, then caught herself. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I should not speak out of turn. But no, your appearance does not frighten me. His grey eyes studied her with fierce intensity. Then what? Your power, she answered honestly. You are a king. I am nothing. That distance frightens me more than any scar ever could. The silence that followed her words seemed to hold its breath. The king remained very still, as if she had struck him. You are not nothing, Mira Whitley, he said finally. Remember that. Then he turned and left the room, leaving her alone with her racing heart and a collection of thoughts she did not dare examine too closely. That night, Mira stood in the king's chambers, building up the fire as he sat reading by lamplight. The routine had become comfortable over the past week. He read. She worked. Neither spoke unless necessary. But tonight felt different. The air between them seemed charged with something unspoken since their encounter in the corridor. Whitley, his voice drew her attention from the fire. Come here. She approached his chair, her hands folded in her apron. He set down his book and regarded her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through all pretense. I wish to ask you something, and I require your absolute honesty. Yes, Your Majesty. Do you find me repulsive? The question struck her like a physical blow. Your Majesty, I would never. I did not ask what you would say in politeness. I asked what you honestly feel. He gestured to his scarred face. Does it disgust you? Mira looked at him, truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time since his arrival. She saw the scar, yes, but she also saw the strong line of his jaw, the intelligence in his grey eyes, the way his dark hair caught the firelight. She saw the man behind the wound. No, she said simply. It does not disgust me. Why not? Others can barely look upon me. Because, Mira chose her words carefully, I see not the scar but the story it tells. You were wounded, protecting something or someone. That mark is proof of courage, not something to be ashamed of. His expression shifted, surprise, replacing the careful neutrality. You are the first person to say such a thing to me. Then others are fools, Your Majesty. A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh, rough from disuse. Careful, Whitley. Such boldness might be mistaken for insolence. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I only meant. I know what you meant. He stood, moving to the window where he so often stood in the lonely hours. This scar was earned in battle 5 years ago. I was defending a supply convoy that had been ambushed. A soldier under my command, a boy barely 18, fell wounded. I carried him from the field while enemy fire rained around us. A sword caught my face as I ran. Mira remained silent, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed her response. The boy lived. I brought him home to his mother. But this, he touched the scar, this ensured that no lady would ever accept my courtship. My advisors tell me I must marry, must produce heirs for my kingdom. But who would willingly bind themselves to this? Someone who sees beyond the surface, Mira said softly. Someone who values the heart beneath. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw such naked loneliness that her own heart ached in response. Such women do not exist in my world, Whitley. Ladies of quality marry for advantage, not sentiment. Then perhaps Your Majesty is looking in the wrong places. The words hung between them, dangerous in their implication. Mira felt heat rise to her cheeks as she realized how her statement might be interpreted. I should go, she said quickly. It grows late and you require rest. Stay. The word was not quite a command, not quite a plea. Please, just stay and sit by the fire. You need not speak. but your presence is—" He did not finish the sentence, but Mira understood. She moved to the chair opposite his and sat, her hands folded in her lap, while the fire crackled between them and the night deepened outside the windows. They sat in silence for a long time, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between two people who have learned to be honest with each other. "Thank you," he said finally, so softly she almost missed it. "For what, Your Majesty?" "For seeing me." The next morning brought disaster. Mira was crossing the main hall with a tray of the king's breakfast when Lady Helena swept down the grand staircase with 4 other ladies in her wake. Their morning gowns rustled like angry birds' wings. "Whitley," Lady Helena's voice rang across the marble floor. "How convenient. We have been discussing you at length this morning." Mira stopped, balancing the tray carefully. "My lady, it has come to our attention," Lady Helena continued, descending the final steps with theatrical flair, "that you have been spending inappropriate amounts of time alone with His Majesty. Evening hours, behind closed doors. Your presence has been noted." The other ladies formed a semicircle around Mira, cutting off any escape. Servants passing through the hall slowed to watch, sensing drama. "I attend His Majesty as commanded by the Queen," Mira said carefully. "I serve him in all appropriate ways." "Appropriate?" Lady Helena's laugh was sharp as glass. "A scullery maid alone with a king through the evening hours? There is nothing appropriate about such an arrangement. I shudder to think what services you provide beyond the official duties." Gasps rippled through the watching servants. Mira's face burned with shame and fury. "You insult both His Majesty and myself with such implications." "Do I?" Lady Helena stepped closer, her beautiful face twisted with malice. "Or do I simply speak aloud what everyone already thinks? A plain little nobody suddenly granted access to a king's private chambers. What could such a man possibly want with such a creature? Unless she provides services he cannot purchase elsewhere," another lady finished, and they all dissolved into cruel laughter. The tray shook in Mira's hands. She wanted to throw it at their mocking faces, wanted to scream her innocence, wanted to defend the king's honor and her own. But she was a servant. Servants had no voice, no defense, no recourse. "I serve His Majesty with honor," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "If you cannot see that, the failing is yours, not mine." "How dare you?" Lady Helena's hand flashed out, knocking the tray from Mira's grasp. China shattered across the marble floor. Food splattered across Mira's dress and the ladies' fine gowns. "You clumsy fool," Lady Helena shrieked. "Look what you've done. These gowns cost more than you could earn in 10 years. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Mira dropped at her knees, trying to gather the broken pieces with her bare hands. Blood welled from a cut on her palm where a sharp edge had caught her. "Sorry is not sufficient." Lady Helena's voice dripped venom. "You will be dismissed for this. Dismissed without a character reference. You will leave this palace in disgrace, and everyone will know what kind of girl you truly are." "What kind of girl is she, Lady Helena?" The voice cut through the hall like a blade. Every head turned to see the King of Hanover standing at the top of the grand staircase, his grey eyes blazing with cold fury. Lady Helena paled. "Your Majesty, I did not hear you approach." Clearly, he descended the stairs with deliberate slowness, each step echoing like judgment. "I asked you a question. What kind of girl is Mira Whitley?" "She is a servant who has forgotten her place." Lady Helena recovered some of her composure. "She has been making inappropriate implications, spending improper time in your presence. It is unseemly and—" "In what?" The king reached the bottom of the stairs and moved toward where Mira still knelt among the broken china. "She has served me with absolute propriety and dignity. She has asked for nothing, assumed nothing, and treated me with more genuine respect than any so-called lady in this palace." He reached down and gently took Mira's bleeding hand, helping her to her feet. The gesture shocked every person in the hall into stunned silence. "Your Majesty," Lady Helena's voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "Surely you cannot defend this creature. She is beneath your notice, beneath all of our notice. She is nothing but a common scullery maid with ideas above her station." The king kept his hand on Mira's, his thumb pressed against her palm to stop the bleeding. When he turned to face Lady Helena, his expression was terrible in its controlled fury. "You speak of stations and worth as if you understand either. You mock a woman who has worked since childhood, who has never complained of hardship, who treats others with kindness despite receiving none in return." His voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Tell me, Lady Helena, what have you contributed to the world beyond cruelty dressed in silk?" Lady Helena's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Behind her, the other ladies looked ready to flee. "She is a servant," Lady Helena finally managed. "We are nobility. That is the natural order." "Is it?" The king's scarred face seemed carved from stone. "I have led men into battle, Lady Helena. I have seen the bravest among them die in mud and blood, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that nobility has nothing to do with birth and everything to do with character." He raised Mira's wounded hand, showing the blood to the assembled crowd. "This woman works until her hands bleed to serve people who mock her. You who have never worked a day in your life dare to judge her unworthy. Your Majesty, you will apologize." The hall fell so silent that the ticking of the great clock sounded like thunder. "I beg your pardon," Lady Helena whispered. "You will apologize to Mira Whitley for your cruelty, for your mockery, and for the lies you have spread about her character and mine." Lady Helena's face flushed red, then white, then red again. "I will do no such thing. Apologize to a servant? Your Majesty, you cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious. I am the Queen's favorite lady in waiting. I am of noble birth. I will not debase myself by apologizing to a common scullery maid." Then the king said with terrible finality, "You may leave this palace and return to your family estate. Immediately, take your possessions and go." Shock rippled through the watching servants and the few nobles present. To dismiss a lady in waiting was unheard of. To do so publicly was a scandal that would echo through society for years. Lady Helena trembled with rage. "The Queen will never allow this. My mother gave me authority over my own household during my visit. I am exercising that authority now. You are dismissed, Lady Helena, as are your companions who participated in this cruelty." The three ladies behind Helena gasped in unison, their faces draining of color. "You will regret this," Lady Helena hissed. "I will make certain all of London knows how the scarred King of Hanover lost his mind over a common servant girl. Then all of London will know I value character over empty titles." He turned his back on her, an ultimate insult. "Whitley, come with me. Your hand needs tending." Mira followed him in a daze, her mind unable to process what had just occurred. Behind them, Lady Helena's sobs of rage and humiliation echoed through the hall as servants whispered and nobles stared in shock. The king led her to his private chambers and personally cleaned and bandaged her wounded hand with gentle efficiency that spoke of battlefield experience. His touch was careful, his expression focused. "Your Majesty," Mira finally found her voice. "You should not have done that. The scandal. Let them talk." He finished tying the bandage and looked up at her, his grey eyes intense. "Let all of London talk. I am tired of pretending that cruelty is acceptable because it comes from people with titles. But the Queen, your position. My mother will understand once I explain. And if she doesn't, I will accept whatever consequences come. He stood, still holding her bandaged hand. I meant what I said, Mira. You have shown me more genuine kindness and respect in 2 weeks than I have received from nobility in 5 years. I only did my duty. No. His voice softened. You did far more than duty required. You saw past this. He touched his scar when no one else would. You spoke honestly to me when everyone else offers only flattery or pity. You treated me as a man, not a monster or a title. Mira's heart pounded so hard she was certain he must hear it. Your Majesty, I don't understand what you're saying, don't you? He smiled, and it transformed his scarred face into something beautiful. I think you do, Mira Whitley. You're simply afraid to believe it. Before she could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. The king released her hand and called, "Enter." A footman appeared, his face grave. Your Majesty, Queen Victoria requests your presence immediately in her private chambers, alone. The king nodded. Tell her I will attend her shortly. As the footman departed, he turned back to Mira. Wait here. Whatever happens next, whatever my mother says, remember what I told you. You are not nothing. He left, and Mira sank into a chair, her mind whirling. What had she done? She had allowed herself to care for a king, to see past his title to the lonely man beneath. She had forgotten the impossible distance between them. Now there would be consequences. An hour passed before the door opened again. But it was not the king who entered. It was Queen Victoria herself, followed by 2 of her remaining ladies in waiting. Mira shot to her feet and curtsied, so deeply her knees protested. Your Majesty, remain as you are, the Queen commanded, studying Mira with an expression impossible to read. I have just had a most extraordinary conversation with my son. Your Majesty, I never intended. He tells me that you have been the victim of systematic cruelty from my ladies, that you have served him faithfully despite mockery and false accusations. I have only done my duty, ma'am. He also tells me, the Queen continued, moving closer, that he intends to ask you to return with him to Hanover as his wife. The world tilted. Mira gripped the chair back to keep from falling. Your Majesty, that's impossible. I am a servant. You are a woman of good character who has earned my son's respect and affection. Queen Victoria's expression softened slightly. I will be honest with you, child. When I assigned you to his service, I hoped only that you would not disturb him, that your humble presence would be soothing after the demands of noble society. I tried only to serve him well, ma'am. You did more than that. He reminded him of his own worth. The Queen paused, seeming to struggle with her words. My son has suffered greatly since his injury, not from the physical wound, but from the way society has treated him afterward, as if he were somehow less because his face bears the mark of his courage. He is the finest man I have ever known, Mira said softly. His scar is merely proof of his bravery. He said you would understand. Queen Victoria smiled, a rare expression that transformed her stern face. That is why I am giving you a choice, Mira Whitley. A choice no scullery maid has likely ever been offered in the history of England. Mira waited, her heart in her throat. My son wishes to marry you, to make you his queen. It would be the greatest scandal London has seen in a generation, but it would also make him happy, which I confess has not been my priority as much as it should have been. The Queen moved closer, taking Mira's hands in her own. If you refuse, I will see you situated in a good position, with a generous settlement. You will never want for anything. But if you accept, if I accept, Mira whispered, you will become one of the most talked about women in Europe. You will face cruelty and mockery from those who believe you do not deserve such elevation. You will spend your life proving yourself worthy of a title you were not born to." The Queen paused, her expression serious. "But you will also have the love of a good man. My son does not offer his heart lightly. Mira, if he has given it to you, it is forever." Tears streamed down Mira's face. "Your Majesty, I am not worthy of such honor. Neither was I when I first became queen," Victoria said gently. "But we rise to meet the expectations placed upon us, or we do not. Which woman are you, Mira Whitley?" Before Mira could answer, the door opened and the king entered. He stopped when he saw his mother holding Mira's hands, his expression uncertain. "Mother, I ask to speak to her first." "And so you shall." Queen Victoria released Mira's hands and moved toward the door. "But I wanted her to understand that she has my support in whatever she chooses. Not because I approve of scandal, but because I approve of happiness. Yours and hers." She paused at the door. "You have 1 hour before I announce my departure for Windsor. Whatever you decide must be decided by then." The door closed behind her, leaving them alone. The king moved slowly across the room, his eyes never leaving Mira's face. "You're crying." "Yes. I'm sorry. I never meant to cause you distress." "It's not distress." Mira wiped at her tears with her bandaged hand. "It's confusion and fear and hope all mixed together until I can't tell one from another." He stopped an arm's length away, close enough to touch, but not touching. "My mother told you what I wish to ask." "Yes." "Then you know that I'm asking you to leave behind everything familiar, to take on a role for which you have no training, to become a target for every gossip and critic in Europe." "Yes." "You would have been wiser to choose the easy path, the settlement, the quiet life, the safety of anonymity." "Probably." Mira looked up at him, this man who had defended her, protected her, seen her true worth when no one else had. "But I have never been accused of excessive wisdom." His scarred mouth curved into a smile. "Is that a yes, Mira Whitley?" "That depends, Your Majesty." "On what?" "On whether you're asking me because you need a queen, or because you want a wife." He closed the distance between them, taking her face gently in his hands. "I am asking because for the first time in 5 years I have met someone who makes me believe that I am more than my scars. Someone who looks at me and sees not a wounded king, but simply a man worthy of love." "You are worthy," Mira whispered. "You were always worthy." "Then say yes. Come with me to Hanover. Be my wife, my queen, my companion. Face the scandal and the mockery at my side, and I promise you I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice." Mira thought of the cold scullery where she had spent 3 years scrubbing pots. She thought of the cruel ladies who had mocked her, the endless invisibility of a servant's life. She thought of her parents, long dead, who had worked themselves into early graves for nothing more than survival. Then she thought of quiet evenings by the fire, of honest conversations in the darkness, of a man who had risked scandal to defend her honor, of a hand holding hers gently while bandaging a wound. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." The King of Hanover, feared by many, understood by few, kissed her then with a gentleness that belied his fearsome reputation. And in that moment, Mira Whitley understood that she had not married a title or a crown. She had married a man who had seen her truly, and been seen truly in return. The wedding took place 1 month later in a small chapel on the grounds of the palace. Queen Victoria insisted, declaring that if society was going to talk anyway, they might as well give them something truly remarkable to discuss. The bride wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her honey-colored hair arranged with wildflowers instead of jewels. The groom wore his military uniform, his scarred face proud and unashamed, as he recited his vows in a voice that carried to every corner of the chapel. Lady Helena and her companions watched from the distant back rows, their presence a requirement of their families' positions at court. Their expressions ranged from fury to disbelief to grudging respect. But the front rows held people Mira truly cared about. Mrs. Harlow wept openly into her handkerchief. The footmen and maids from below stairs sat in their Sunday best, their faces shining with hope that one of their own could rise so high. As the king slipped a golden ring onto Mira's finger, she looked out at the assembled crowd and saw not their judgment, but their possibility. If a scullery maid could become a queen, what else might be possible in a world that valued character over birth? The ceremony concluded. The couple turned to walk back down the aisle as husband and wife. But before they could take their first steps, the king did something that would be spoken of for generations. He knelt. The King of Hanover, ruler of a distant kingdom, hero of battle, knelt before his new queen on the chapel floor in front of all the assembled nobility. "Your Majesty," Mira whispered in shock. "Please, stand up." "Not yet." His voice carried through the silent chapel. "I kneel not in weakness, but in recognition. You have given me the greatest gift any person can give another. You have seen me truly, without pretense or judgment. You have reminded me of my worth when I had forgotten it myself." He took her hands in his. "I kneel before you not as king to subject, but as man to equal. I kneel to ask your forgiveness for every moment of pain my station has caused you, and to promise that I will spend my life ensuring you never regret this choice." Tears streamed down Mira's face as she gently pulled him to his feet. "You have nothing to ask forgiveness for. You saved me, defended me, chose me when you could have chosen anyone. I chose the only woman worthy of being chosen." He smiled, that transformation of his scarred face that never failed to take her breath away. "I chose you, Mira, and I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." The chapel erupted into applause, even from those who had doubted the match, because in that moment of genuine humility and love, they had witnessed something rarely seen in noble circles. They had witnessed two people seeing past all the barriers of station and circumstance to recognize each other's true worth. As the couple walked down the aisle together, Queen Victoria watched with tears in her eyes. She had worried that her son would spend his life lonely and bitter, defined by his scars rather than his character. Instead, he had found someone who loved him not, despite his wounds, but because of the courage they represented. He had found his equal in the most unlikely place, and he had taught all who witnessed his wedding an unforgettable lesson: that true nobility has nothing to do with birth, and everything to do with the courage to love without condition. The couple departed for Hanover 3 days later, their carriage followed by a train of servants and supplies for their new life together. Mira stood at the carriage window, watching the palace fade into the distance, her hand held securely in her husband's. "Any regrets?" he asked softly.
"None."
She turned to smile at him. "How could I regret choosing love over fear?" "The road ahead won't be easy," he warned. "There will be those who never accept you, who always see the scullery maid rather than the queen. Then I will remind them every day that a queen is not defined by her birth, but by her actions." Mira squeezed his hand. "Besides, I have something they will never understand." "What's that?" "I know what it means to have nothing, to work until my hands bleed, to be invisible and unheard. That knowledge will make me a better queen than any amount of noble breeding could provide." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her bandaged palm where the scar from broken china was still healing. "You will be remarkable." "We will be remarkable," she corrected, "together." And so began the story that would be told for generations in the kingdom of Hanover. The story of the scullery queen who rose from the lowest station to the highest. Not through ambition or manipulation, but simply by being herself. by treating others with kindness when she received none, by seeing worth in a wounded king when others saw only a scarred face. The ladies who had mocked her never forgot the day the king knelt before a servant in front of all the nobility. Some learned from it, examining their own cruelty and choosing better paths. Others remained bitter, unable to accept a world where birth mattered less than character. But Mira never looked back. She threw herself into her new role with the same dedication she had once applied to scrubbing pots. She learned languages, studied history, worked tirelessly to improve the lives of the poorest citizens in her adopted kingdom. And every evening, as she sat with her husband by the fire in their private chambers, she would remove the silver crown and set it aside. She would let down her hair and take his hand, and they would simply be Mira and Alexander, two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk together into light. The story of the Queen's ladies who mocked the Scullery Maid reminds us of a truth that transcends time and place, that those who mock others for their station reveal only their own insecurity, that true nobility has nothing to do with birth and everything to do with how we treat those who cannot benefit us. Remember that the person you dismiss as unworthy might be the one who changes everything, that kindness offered to those who have no power to repay it is the truest test of character, that love which sees past all barriers to recognize another's worth is the only love worthy of the name. The King of Hanover knelt not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to humble himself before what truly mattered. He chose a woman who had nothing to offer but herself, and in doing so gained everything worth having. And the Scullery Maid who became a queen never forgot where she came from. She used her position not to rise above her origins, but to lift others who shared them. She proved that the distance between the scullery and the throne is not measured in birth or status, but in courage and character. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that their worth is not determined by their station, that dignity belongs to all who choose to claim it, that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not in ballrooms, but in the shadows, where two people see each other truly for the first time. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, honor, and love that defies convention. Comment below and tell us which moment touched your heart most deeply. Was it when the king first defended Mira from the cruel ladies, when he knelt to ask her forgiveness, or perhaps when she chose love over the safety of anonymity? Every week we bring you tales that remind us of what truly matters in this world, not wealth or status, but the courage to see beyond them, not power or position, but the wisdom to use them for good, not the judgment of society, but the quiet certainty of a heart that knows its own worth. Stay until the end, and another powerful story will appear on your screen, ready to carry you into a world where love conquers all and courage transforms everything it touches. Remember always that you are more than your circumstances. You are more than others' judgment of you. You are worthy simply because you exist, and no one can take that worth away unless you surrender it. This is the lesson of the Scullery Queen, who taught a kingdom that nobility of spirit far exceeds nobility of birth. This is the gift of the king who knelt, who showed that true strength lies in recognizing the worth of others, not in demanding recognition of your own. Their love story began in mockery and shadow, but it bloomed into light that still shines across the years, a reminder that the most unlikely love can sometimes be the truest, the most lasting, the most transformative. May you find in your own life someone who sees you as you truly are, someone who values your character over your circumstances, someone before whom you can be completely yourself, knowing you are loved, not despite your imperfections, but including them. And may you be that person for someone else. May you see past the barriers that divide us to recognize the shared humanity that unites us. May you defend those who cannot defend themselves. May you choose courage over comfort, love over fear, truth over convenience. This is how queens are made, not in coronations but in choices. This is how kings prove their worth, not in conquest but in humility. This is how love triumphs, not by ignoring differences, but by recognizing that what unites us is stronger than what divides us. The Queen's ladies mocked the scullery maid until the king knelt and begged her forgiveness. In doing so, he taught them all that true royalty has nothing to do with crowns and everything to do with courage.